can hear me. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you all, to everyone who's joining us for this seminar, both those of you who are listening in and our speakers today. Everyone should see a chat function to the right of the screen, and it would be really nice to get a sense of who's here with us if you could write your name in the chat and where you're from. So our title for today is Co-Designing a Community Carbon Project in Honduras. We can go back a slide actually. And this seminar has been arranged jointly, thanks, by the Swedish company Zero Emission, which I represent, and our colleagues in the Paskaia project. And very shortly we'll introduce ourselves properly. But before the introductions, now we come to a couple of house rules. So we can take the next slide. Now, there's a very important function we're going to try and use today. You'll see up to the right, on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a button for translations. And there, if you click there, you should be able to get simultaneous translation of Spanish to English and vice versa. So please try it. Oh, can someone who's in the group presenting indicate if they're hearing me? Great, thank you very much. Good. So house rules number 1 was the translation. Up to the right, there's a translation button. Do try it for getting simultaneous translation. And then the second point there is use the chat, which I can see people already are, which is wonderful. So welcome to Hannah and Stina and Samantha, for instance. Please write, if you're listening in today, please write in yourself there. So now on to the introductions properly. We can take the next slide. Thank you. So my name is Claire Wigg and I'm the moderator for today's seminar. I work for a company in Sweden called Zero Emission, and we support businesses in measuring, reducing and offsetting their greenhouse gas emissions. We are today co-hosting this seminar with an organization called Paskaia. So over to you, Lars, representing Paskaia project as the first speaker.
Thank you, Claire, and welcome to everyone. I'm really looking forward for the next 90 minutes that will show how we really try to do this cooperation and see how it works together with all the different participants today. Since Paskaia is a new company, it's about a year and a half since we started. I think some background info is well suited here. So can you please change the slide? Thank you. On myself, I'm certainly not a climate expert, nor from the forestry sector. I've been running companies for the last 30 years, mainly in the media industry. But what Paskaia stands for has really got me going. And today I'm the chairman of the company. And as you will hear today, there are a few important things that we should talk about that is key for us in Paskaia. And please change the slide. And number 1, of course, is that we are working closely with the farmers in Paskaia. And this is clear for us that we have a very long-term focus in this. And number 2 is a thing that is core for us, and that you will hear more of that later. The initiative for all this comes from Paskaia originally. Maybe very few of us here today know much about this part of the world, but the need is very strong in this area. And there is a huge potential there, but the resources are very slim, as you will hear. Number 4, the scientific approach is key here. There are researchers on the board and among the people that form the company, and we're also working closely with researchers today. And finally, when it comes to Paskaia, some of the people in this company have been working locally for more than 15 years with reforestation in the area. All this together sort of summarizes into what Paskaia stands for. You know, it's a word that comes from the local language, which is not Spanish, and it means build for the future. And I think that sort of summarizes it. That's a very short introduction to the company. And with that, over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Great. We take the next slide. So here you see the agenda for today. With the title Co-Designing a Community Carbon Project in Honduras, we'll be looking at co-design in nature-based carbon offset projects, why it's important and how it can be done in practice. And the background to this seminar is that carbon offsetting is very much in the spotlight at the moment. There's a lot of discussion at COP about it and about what constitutes a good quality project. So we hope to contribute to that discussion. We're going to focus on this one particular carbon offset project, which is being developed in Honduras right now, the Paskaia project. And first of all, we'll hear short presentations from the various stakeholders. As you'll see on the picture there, we have quite a lot of people involved, and we're just hoping the technology is with us today. We have 3 people speaking from Honduras, and their connections, we hope, will be good. We keep our fingers crossed. And then after the presentations, we have a panel discussion. I can take the next slide. Thank you. There are always quite a number of organizations involved in developing carbon projects, each with slightly different perspectives and interests. What you see here is that we're very fortunate to have 6 organizations in this particular network represented today, and they're all working on the Paskaia project. And this is the web or network of actors that are involved in different ways in developing, designing, managing a project. And each one will present. And then when it comes to the panel, we'll have a few other people involved. A researcher called Clara Fischer from the Swedish Agricultural Sciences University, and Hector Lagos from a government agency for forestry in Honduras, and Magnus Bergström, who's also working in the Paskaia organization. So we're going to start the presentations, working our way around this network, and we start with Keith Bahanan. Keith is the CEO of the Plan Vivo Foundation. That's the organization that we hope will certify the Paskaia project as a carbon offset project. So Keith, over to you about how Plan Vivo works with community engagement and co-design. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and hi to everybody listening in and watching. So yes, today in the web, which Claire described, I'm representing the certification standard Plan Vivo Foundation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of background for those who may not know who we are. We're a charitable foundation based in Edinburgh in the UK, and also a voluntary carbon certification standard with over 25 years experience of certifying carbon projects across the world. What's different for Plan Vivo, maybe to other standards you might be familiar with, are firstly, we believe very strongly in working directly with those most affected by climate change. In that case, we mean smallholders and rural communities. We have a model which, of course, is about measuring carbon and making sure that the carbon claims and credits are real, are additional and verifiable. But also, we have a model which also measures the social impact and also the biodiversity impact as well. So this holistic model is really core to how we work. We have a participatory model, which is what we're going to really focus on today, the co-design aspect, which really puts those smallholders and communities at the center of the design process. They're the ones designing the project. It's not something done remotely. And also, another key part of the Plan Vivo standard is the requirement for equitable benefit sharing. So when carbon credits are generated, they're then fairly traded and bought by responsible buyers, some of who you will hear from today. Next slide, please. So just to unpick this holistic model a little bit, as you can see, this requirement to directly engage with the stakeholders is the foundation of what we do. We then have the carbon impact and different methodologies for how you measure that. We have the social impact and we have the biodiversity impact. But core is how you're engaging the communities and stakeholders in that design. So that participatory design element, that first element, is about transparency, accountability, and about community ownership. Next slide, please. So if you go in more detail into the documents behind the Plan Vivo standard, you see we have project requirements, methodology requirements, and then requirements for the validation and verification of projects. If you click, please. If we unpick the project requirements, you see there are a number of different chapters, and what we're going to talk today is about the stakeholder engagement chapter. Next slide, please. So to unpick some of this, in terms of stakeholder analysis, I guess many of you involved in community projects, either carbon or non-carbon, will be used to doing a stakeholder analysis. This is a key part of the project design process for Plan Vivo. In terms of participatory design, projects need to demonstrate that they've worked directly with representation from all the primary stakeholders. So projects can't just go in and work with one section of the community. They need to show that they've, first of all, understand who's in the community, who are the people who are affected by the project, and how are they being incorporated into the process of design. And that includes marginalized people. It needs to look at incorporating and inclusion in terms of gender, age, religion, and so on. So it can't just be one subset of the community. Next slide, please. We also then, once we've identified, or once the project has identified the community and the stakeholders, then there must be an engagement plan for how they're involved in the process. So how are they feeding in? Are they directly involved in the design, or are they more informed on the design and how they're involved? And a really important concept is free, prior, and informed consent. This process of making sure that what happens is actually bought into by the community, that there's, including the design, the implementation, and the monitoring and evaluation. So those conditions must be agreed, and that includes maybe Indigenous peoples, local communities, and it must take into account local laws, customary rights, and any legal and local obligations. So that all has to be captured in the design documentation, which are reviewed by the Plan Vivo technical team before that project can become registered and can start generating any carbon credits. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a little example of some of the detail of what this co-design and participation looks like. Plan Vivo means living plan in English. It's Spanish for living plan, because our first project was in Mexico. And this is an example of a living plan from one of our projects, where we work using participatory rural appraisal tools and techniques. Again, many of you may be familiar. In this case, to map out the resources that a community has and how they're going to use it. If you click again, please. And basically that forms the basis, and those discussions form the basis of a contract with the community and with the project. And this is we call a PES contract, or a payment for ecosystem services, which is a results-based payment mechanism where there are very clear milestones which incentivizes communities to manage the project and to progress the project through the different phases. And those payments linked to the carbon finance are related to those performance indicators. Next slide, please. So that's a very quick summary of a very detailed process. And I think you'll see in the next presentation where you look at the perspective of the project developer, some of the detail of how the project that we're talking about today in Honduras has followed those requirements. So look forward to seeing that, and look forward to joining more in the panel discussion at the end. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. So that's starting us off. And now we take the next slide, and we move to the right in this web. We come to the research perspective around what co-design actually is. So here is Neil ready to present to us. Neil is a professor at Uppsala University in Sweden in the Center for Education for Sustainable Development. Neil, please share your screen, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Claire. I hope you're seeing the right screen now. Maybe you could just confirm that. Hello, Claire.
Yes, we're seeing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good. Yeah, no, thanks very much. And it was nice to hear your presentation, Keith. As the organisation we are hoping will certify the project, I hope I say the correct things now. So I'll just jump straight into it now. Compensating for one's own emissions in high income contexts by supporting carbon offsetting forestry projects in lower income countries has been a really controversial topic at this COP meeting, as Claire mentioned earlier. Some argue that we cannot combat climate change without such projects, whilst others draw on a justice critique and argue that the local social costs that stem from the inequities associated with these projects are just too high. There are good grounds for both arguments. However, it's important to acknowledge that there is a great diversity in terms of the approach that underpin the implementation of many of these projects. We argue that many of the traps associated with carbon offsetting can be avoided by actively co-designing these projects with the potential clients. In our case, with Swedish companies and local communities who are actually implementing these projects. In 2018, Paskaia's CEO Magnus, who you'll hear from later, met Rinaldo, who was at the time the president of Muster. Muster is a representative authority for the mosquito and other local indigenous groups. And they are engaged in a process where their ancestral land title is presently being transferred back, which will amount to an area of more than 1.5 million hectares when it's complete. In the exchange, an idea grew up of setting up a project supported by carbon offsets, aiming at restoring the extensive areas of degraded forest savanna to support sustainable livelihoods in the area. And you can see an example of this degraded savanna here. And those areas you can see are the grey areas, basically, in this picture. Carbon offsetting projects are typically implemented in very complex socio-ecological systems that are dynamic and exhibit non-linear, emergent and random properties. Interdependencies can lead to the export of vulnerabilities and compound or reproduce inequalities across sectors and societal intersections, such as gender, class and ethnicity. The Gracia Dios project in Honduras is characterized by a history of encroachment from settlers, which has led to significant forest clearance and degraded natural habitats. Historically, deforestation has been difficult to control on account of the government's failure to enforce regulations, corruption, and insecure land tenure. And the vulnerability of the mosquito subsistence economy has been exacerbated by an increasing frequency and intensity of storms that can be attributed to climate change. In short, these types of contexts are wicked, and project implementation more often than not ends up leading to outcomes that were not initially envisaged. And instead the status quo, or certainly in cases, the status quo can be reproduced and amplified, whereby power holders gain more agency and the marginalised become even worse off. So what project development approach are we implementing to ensure that the Gracia Dios project leads to socially just outcomes? Many of the inequities associated with carbon offsetting projects stem from the fact that local people are not involved in their design. Building on the lessons learned from other projects, Paskaia, with the support of the Mr. Environmental Communication program, has developed a novel co-design process to support the development of the Gracia Dios project. Co-design refers to the collective creativity of a group of stakeholders that is enacted across the entire design process. The approach embraces stakeholders as co-designers who contribute with real-world knowledge, values, perceptions, and interests, which in turn will minimise the risk of failure due to blind spots, designer bias, or misinterpretation of context-specific content. The co-design process in terms of the Gracia Dios project aims to provide both a safe and inclusive learning space to support the selection and assessment of different constellations of measures and development activities aimed both at promoting sustainable livelihoods in Mosquitia and enhancing the participatory project clients, i.e. the Swedish companies, social and environmental accountability. The first phase of the co-design process is ongoing. Focus groups with community participants from Mosquitia are presently surfacing socio-ecological issues through focus groups. And in late November, we plan to have a focus group with 5 Swedish companies to discuss the issues they face in terms of their own social and environmental accountability. In the second phase, a co-inquiry process will be facilitated between project stakeholders from Mosquitia and Sweden in order to identify desirable measures that can lead to sustainable changes in their respective systems. A key consideration when facilitating this co-inquiry process is recognising the potential conflicts of interest associated with these types of measures and their vulnerability to socio-ecological shocks. Finally, in phase 3, focus groups will be held in the project site to identify potential project developments that could be sustained on account of the changes attributed to the improvement in their ecosystems by the project and from the resources they hope to generate from carbon sequestration. We envisage the project co-design will be an iterative, ongoing process as new project clients and new communities engage with the Gracia Dios project. So I'd like to end here. I've used quite a lot of time. This slide we might want to come back to in the panel discussion, which talks about how perhaps project co-design can address some of the climate compensation critique that we hear so much about. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Neil. I learnt a lot there, and I look forward to reading that slide in detail sometime soon. Thank you. So, but now we need to move on. Unfortunately, we come back to these same issues in the panel. We now move on to Honduras and to a person, Ranulfo Andares, who until recently was the president of MASTA, the group for the Mosquito people in Honduras. He was the initiative taker for this project that's being developed, and he has sent us a pre-recorded presentation. It's in Spanish, and at this point we're hoping that everyone has found the translation, everyone who needs it has found the translation button and can use that for listening in. Thank you, Johanna, if you can try and play that.
Good, so you see the screen now that I'm sharing?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, let's see here. It's coming up, Ranulfo.
Un saludo especial desde la Mosquitia, o el departamento de Gracias a Dios, Honduras, Centroamérica. En mi condición de presidente del pueblo indígena Miskito a través de la organización MASTA, me complace enviarle un caluroso saludo a nombre de mi pueblo indígena Miskito. Mi nombre es Ranulfo Julián Andares. Me siento muy contento de participar a través de este video y haber recibido la invitación de esta conferencia internacional sobre el cambio climático que las Naciones Unidas se está celebrando con la participación de todos los países del mundo. Queremos alzar nuestra voz ante el mundo, dejar nuestra preocupación. Nuestros ancestros nos han enseñado a convivir con la naturaleza, cuidar, conservar nuestros recursos naturales. Sin embargo, en las últimas décadas, personas extrañas o ajenas a nuestra cultura nos han invadido nuestras tierras y han deforestado miles de hectáreas de nuestros bosques y se han llevado de manera ilegal nuestros bosques. Esta situación ha traído consecuencias, de manera que hemos sido víctimas de fuertes afectaciones por el tema de cambio climático, porque el año pasado, recientemente, hemos sido abatidos por las tormentas tropicales ETA y IOTA. Como pueblo hemos perdido todas nuestros cultivos, nuestros ganados y nuestras casas. Hoy en día estamos en una situación muy crítica y hemos gestionado initiar el proyecto de la reforestación.
Ja, det är alltså 2 filmer här, så vi kommer att visa den andra också. Häng kvar. Ska vi se här. Det är lite spännande det här med både presentationer och filmer. So we're sharing the part 2 here as well.
Proyecto de la reforestación a nivel de toda nuestra región de la Mosquitia. De esa manera captar los fondos que existen por la compensación del carbono. Hemos conversado con la empresa Paskaia de Suecia, que encabeza don Magnus y el amigo Marvin aquí en Honduras. Nosotros como pueblo les presentamos nuestro proyecto. Ellos aceptaron nuestra iniciativa y ellos gestionaron apoyarnos para hacer realidad nuestro sueño. Y estamos agradecidos que estamos logrando este sueño anhelado. Queremos conservar, queremos reconstruir, reforestar, regenerar nuestros bosques. De esta manera, generar empleo, generar ingresos en la familia misquita, en la Mosquitia hondureña. Hemos sido un pueblo olvidado. No tenemos otra fuente de ingreso. No tenemos oportunidades de empleo, oportunidades de estudio. Estamos abandonados. Vivimos en una situación paupérrima, una pobreza extrema a un nivel demasiado alto. Y quiero aprovechar esta ocasión a los países del mundo que nos extienda esa mano, que nos apoye, así como al aliado que tenemos a Paskaia. Queremos dejar la invitación a otros países poderosos económicamente, que nos apoye trabajar con este proyecto de la reforestación y de esa manera minimizar las amenazas del cambio climático que nos afecta a todo el mundo. Nuestra expectativa es lograr el apoyo de ustedes, así como lo tenemos en este momento de Paskaia, de Zero Mission, y de esta manera esperamos lograr el apoyo de muchos países. Muchas gracias por esta oportunidad. Un saludo nuevamente caluroso desde la Mosquitia a todos los países y gobiernos amigos. Muchas gracias.
There, that was Ranulfo. So I'll stop sharing his video there. And we'll come back to the presentation. And now I'm speaking English. I realized I was speaking Swedish there for a while.
That was great. Thank you. And I hope everyone got the translation, everyone who needed it got the translation working. Now we come around the circle or around the web to the next person. And we have Marvin Rodriguez, who is employed in Honduras to develop this project. And I'm going to interview him. We don't speak each other's languages, so we'll be going back and forth with the translation, see how it goes. So a very warm welcome, Marvin, to this seminar. It's great to have you here with us from Honduras. You're working in a professional capacity to coordinate the project. Could you just tell us what's been happening? What's happened so far? When did you start? What have you been doing?
Hola, muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes a todos por allá. La empresa Paskaia nace, ¿verdad?, gracias a las gestiones realizadas en su momento por el presidente de Masa, Julián Ranulfo, ¿verdad? Lo que nosotros hemos pretendido alcanzar es llevar la respuesta anhelada que han tenido, que ha hecho y que ha solicitado, no solo Ranulfo, también otros amigos, ¿verdad?, para que esto pueda ser realidad. Hemos logrado penetrar allá en la mosquitia y darnos cuenta de las necesidades que hay. Nos quedamos cortos en cuanto a lo que se puede hacer y lo que queremos alcanzar. Intenta hacer algo ambicioso, pero creemos que con la ayuda de muchas demás organizaciones podemos lograrlo, ¿verdad? Actualmente hemos logrado, ¿verdad?, involucrar a las comunidades y a los entes de gobierno local, y ellos están de acuerdo en que se pueda ejecutar un proyecto de esta índole en la zona.
Great, thank you. And could you give us a bit more detail? What's happened so far? You began, I think, about a year ago. What have you done? And what have you done specifically with the local communities?
Sí, la empresa Paskaia, ¿verdad?, ha logrado estar ya en la zona. Hemos logrado alcanzar ya iniciar con los procesos de viveros, claro, previo a cumplir todos los mandatos que exige la ley, ¿verdad? Estando de acuerdo todos, hemos logrado avanzar con el cumplimiento de algunos convenios en el cual nuestro país es firmante, ¿verdad? Y considerando todo esto, hemos logrado avanzar hasta el punto de que hemos iniciado con los proyectos de reforestación en algunas zonas acá, ¿verdad? Tenemos ya algunos viveros. Perdón, no sé si me están gestando.
Areas that have problems.
Okay, and do you have any relationship to the Mosquito community yourself?
Pues nuestra relación con ellos ha sido muy estrecha, desde el inicio, ¿verdad? Participamos en reuniones continuas con los líderes, con las comunidades, y la intención de este proyecto es que cada uno de los actores se empodere de este proyecto, ¿verdad? La idea es que esto pueda funcionar para los distintos actores. Entonces nosotros hemos tenido esa participación de todos los actores que van a estar en su momento involucrados con este tipo de proyectos, iniciando desde la parte gubernamental, ¿verdad? Las entidades y secretarías encargadas del manejo de proyectos de forestería, la máxima organización que es MASA, en la cual, ¿verdad?, no puede ser posible que un proyecto se desarrolle dentro de una área que se considera una reserva mundial, ¿verdad?, donde habitan ellos, que han habitado por generaciones, el involucramiento de las comunidades, que cada una puede tener sus propios reglamentos, y las familias más íntimamente con ellos, ¿verdad? Hemos estado involucrándonos y tratando de que ellos se empoderen, y a la verdad es que ellos quieren empoderar de este proyecto, y se debe a la necesidad que existe en la zona de poder tener un
and to
proyecto
be
de
able to
este
have
en el cual ellos lo pueden calificar, ¿verdad? Y de cierto modo, digamos que así lo hacen,
the
como la
information that they
única,
need
el único
from us and to
salvavidas
be
que
able
ellos
to
tienen
qualify
ahora
everything
para intentar recuperar sus
to
votos,
be able to
para
work with
intentar
it and to
recuperar
face
su
all of the
ambiente
different
como una
problems in
oportunidad de
this
poderse
situation
desarrollar socioeconómicamente.
and to be able to develop the communities economically.
Great. I wonder, Marvin, what has been a surprise? Have there been any surprises or new things you've learned about co-design and working collaboratively to develop the project? Anything?
Sí, normalmente uno está acostumbrado a que en proyectos de reforestación, hablándolo así, ¿verdad? Llega alguien y dice, yo quiero hacer esto, aquello y lo otro, y viene como con mano dura. Pero en el proyecto de codiseño, lo que pretendemos, ¿verdad? Y lo que ha surgido es la oportunidad de que cada actor, de que cada grupo que va a estar involucrado, ¿verdad? Se empodere de esa acción. Entonces, es algo bastante nuevo, creo, y es una forma, lo miramos, de que esto pueda funcionar, de que pueda ser un gran éxito. Porque cuando tú llegas y tú pretendes establecer algo a la brava, decimos acá en Honduras, ¿verdad? Algo que quieres hacerlo autoritariamente, que solo tú tienes la razón. Pero acá cada actor es experto en su área. Los miembros de las comunidades, las personas que viven allá dentro de la mosquitia, ellos son expertos en el clima, como se ve allá. Ellos son expertos dónde son los lugares que sí se puede hacer. Ellos recuerdan dónde se estaban los bosques. Nosotros no vamos a ir a intentar a colocar un bosque donde no hubo. Hay sabanas que están ahí porque son inundables. Y ahí lo que haría era amarles. Ellos son los expertos allá y miramos que es bastante novedoso hasta porque vamos a darle a ellos, a los que viven allá, esa importancia del conocimiento local. Tenemos también por otra parte los entes gubernamentales, ¿verdad? Ellos son expertos en manejar la forma del derecho a la tierra, para que ese beneficio que va a haber ahí, tanto ecológicamente, que nos va a beneficiar a todo el mundo, va a haber un beneficio económico que tanto han añorado, ¿verdad?, las comunidades locales. Para Paskaia, para nosotros que hemos estado organizando esto acá, en realidad es algo donde nos sentimos bastante cómodos, pensando, ¿verdad?, que todos vamos a actuar y vamos a empujar ese bote para que vaya lo más pronto posible y obtener los resultados que tanto hemos deseado por años, ¿verdad?
And that's all really nice to hear, actually. So thank you very much, Marvin, for being with us and for getting all this to work. Thank you. We will move on. We will move on to the next presentation around our web. And now we come to the Swedish side again, and we come to the buyer perspective. So we have Johanna Grant with us today from the company I'm with, Zero Mission. And she will present actually what Zero Mission does and how we're involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been also running the technique here in the background. So when you say ping, I'm the one who pressed the button. So you can blame me if it's a little bit delayed sometimes. But I'm really honored to follow up from Ranulfo and Marvin, because we are definitely in each part of the chain here. Well, I guess Kai, who will speak after me, is even further away, but carbon offset is something invisible, but here you see all the relations that in the web that we feel creates the integrity that we need. So from me, you are going to hear about the reseller perspective. I have 3 questions that I'm going to talk to you about. Just to give you a background who we are and why we work with Plan Vivo projects and Paskaia. Also a little bit what the carbon offsetting trends are in Sweden, just to give you a context, and also in what way we are part of the co-designing web here that you see. we just celebrated Halloween here in the family, so I still see that it's a little bit on the Halloween topic. So this is us. This picture has already gotten old, even though we took it not even a year ago. We're a fast growing company. We were founded in 2006, working with climate strategies, as you see, where carbon offset is one part. But already in 2006, when we were established, we introduced Plan Vivo projects into the Swedish market. At that time, we only had, I think, around 3 projects. I can barely keep count of how many projects we have today, but it's nearly maybe 25 or 30. But we are value-based companies. Our vision is to take companies to net zero today for a living planet tomorrow. And in our values, we find that is the good thing with the Plan Vivo is that it's not only a focus on the climate aspect of carbon offset. Instead, the core is to, as we heard from Keith and the previous speakers, that strengthening ecosystem and biodiversity and improve livelihoods in vulnerable places that are in the forefront of climate change. That's what makes me happy when I go to work, that I actually get to be connected with these important things. And for us, when you see a little bit trends, I started at Zero Emission 2010, 11 years ago. At that time, as we were only 4 people, we were a bit of an underdog. At that time, the CDM were dominating the market, and they were really expensive projects back then. So tree planting projects was a little bit looked down on, especially from our competitors that were more into the CDM. And so I think we strived a little bit against the headwinds. But then after the Paris Agreement, and also there were many things going on there with the hot summer in 2018 and the Greta movement, but the world are going towards net zero 2050. The goal is very clear. So there's been a large focus on removals and nature-based climate solutions, such as tree planting and also RED products. So today, Zero Emission has grown from this little underdog with 4 people, and we're one of the leading markets in Sweden, selling mainly nature-based climate projects, such as tree planting. We're the only ones selling the Plan Vivo projects too. And right now, we see this raised awareness among companies and raised levels, and that also follows up with more claims. And so there's an ongoing debate both about greenwashing, but also, carbon offset covers so many different types of projects. And if one project has done something that is negative in some way, it's easy to just that all the projects are watered down. So sometimes we see a little bit debate about what's a bit black and white debate, which I find is tougher in Sweden than in other countries. So that's little the context that we are working on today. Everybody's looking for the holy grail, this removal project that is permanent and large scale and cheap, but we know that we need all these techniques. So our part in this nice web, we're actually not part in the co-designing. It's supposed to be a bottom-up approach, but it's a unique it's situation, I guess, for us that we are still part and have close relationship, because the Paskaia are also located here in Sweden. So Paskaia with Magnus and Lars and Neil got in touch with Zero Emission in early 2020, and then we initiated a dialogue where we could share our market experience and what we found was like quality when it comes to project development. And in the late 2020, last year, we applied for a grant to the Nordic Project Fund, and this enabled us to conduct a feasibility study in Honduras. And third, recently we have 2 colleagues that actually speak Spanish, so we had a virtual meeting with representatives from the Mosquito people, also sharing this is our world as a reseller. And those meetings are also always very valuable. So once the projects start issuing carbon credits, maybe in 2022, then Zero Emission will be the sales partner in the Nordics. So that's our journey together. And I'll end there.
Great, thank you, Johanna. Now we're getting the picture, I hope. We continue our journey around the web, and we come to, I guess, what you might consider the end of the chain, and Max Burgers, who is a Swedish company represented by Kai Turek, who is their Chief Sustainability Officer, if I remember correctly. Kai, welcome in, and you're going to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I've been asked to tell you just a little bit about Max and why we're buying carbon offsets. So we started off in 1968 in Sweden. It was Kurt and Breda, two young teenagers, but at this time they are actually retired, almost. They're still working in the company. So Kurt is working chairman, and Breda is also working with things, but it's their sons, Richard and Christopher, who's taken over the daily operations. And we've grown from this small company of two teenagers to 5,000 co-workers. We have restaurants mainly in Sweden, but also in Norway, Denmark, Poland, and Egypt. But being a family-owned company with explicit purpose of being family-owned for at least 4 generations more, we need a business model that is in line with what society needs. And right now, society desperately needs to fix the climate. So it's important to us as well. And we know that we're selling food that has a climate impact. And so we are part of the problem. And we thoroughly believe that if you're part of the problem, you should be part of the solution. So what we're doing around climate is 3 things. We're measuring the whole value chain. That means everything from the farmer's land to the guest hand to the guest's journey back and forth to the restaurants. And we are measuring all the greenhouse gases according to all the standards. And we have the widest climate analysis in the restaurant industry since 2008. We have been working hard to reduce the emissions. We have 100% wind power in Sweden. We are selling a lot of green burgers. That means lacto-ovo vegetarian or fully plant-based burgers with a really low climate impact. Not just that, of course, but we're launching that segment and it's growing quite fast. But always there's still emissions left. We have reduced our climate impact per average earned krona with 24% the last 6 years. But we need to go further down and increase it even more, and still we have emissions. So what do we do about those emissions? Well, we're still part of the problem, so of course we want to do something about capturing them if it's possible. So that's why we have, since 2008, bought Plan Vivo certified projects. So the emissions, all the emissions from Max, or actually 110% of the emissions from Max today is offsetted. And that means that more carbon is drawn down from the atmosphere together with all these smallhold farmers in Uganda, in Mexico, in Nicaragua, more than what our whole value chain emits. And we call that climate positive. And we're trying to get other companies to go climate positive, and they are actually. So we're buying this not just because it's responsibility for us, but it's also important to our guests. They like companies that take responsibility for the climate, so we are becoming more popular doing this. And we are allowing Swedes, or any guest, of course, but mainly Swedes today, to vote with their wallet, not just having a good meal that is really, really tasty, but also that allows them to take climate responsibility at the same time. So we have been taking market shares in Sweden. We're larger than Burger King here. We're still smaller than McDonald's, but we're really popular burger chain, and dealing with climate change in all these ways have made us even more popular. Thank you.
Great. Very, very positive, inspiring presentation. Thank you, Kai. Now that concludes our presentations around the web of our actors involved in this project. So I'd like to invite the panel members in. And while the panel is getting ready, I would like to invite those of you who are listening to pose any questions you have in the chat. I will keep an eye on that. I have, of course, some questions to pose to the panel, and some of the panel you've already met, Kai and Hannah and Keith. We have 3 new members of the panel coming in now. We have Clara Fischer. Clara is a researcher from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences who has specifically looked at carbon projects and mostly other development projects, including forestry. And we have Magnus Bergström, who's the CEO of the Swedish company Paskaia, who are working with the Mosquito people in Honduras. And we have Hector Lagos, who is coordinator of a national program for reforestation in Honduras, working in the government department. Hector will speak to us in Spanish, so be ready with the translation button. Great. So I'd like to start with Magnus, actually. And my first question, Magnus, is what led to you choosing with the people in Honduras the Plan Vivo standard for the project?
Yeah, actually, we were like looking at different. No, to be honest, first we thought that it wouldn't be necessary with the standard because we were like the good guys. We had really good networks, so we were thinking like just presenting this to the market, people would buy this. But then eventually we were thinking, perhaps not, a bit too optimistic. So we thought that perhaps we need a standard. So we were like browsing around, and what really led us to first Plan Vivo and then to zero emission was a little bit what Keith were talking about before, that we don't think ourselves as just carbon offsetting. This is so much more than that. It's what you heard today. It's the social part, biodiversity, and all that. And we felt that all this was sort of handled with the Plan Vivo approach. And also another thing, that Plan Vivo, it was possible to talk to Plan Vivo. You can write them the answers, and you can call them up. That was, to be honest, a really important part of it as well.
Keith, I'm sure will be pleased to hear. Then if we go to the project itself, you've been working with it for over a year now, maybe more, and I'm interested to know about potential conflicts of interests or values that you've seen when you've been working on designing this project. Any conflicts of interest between different stakeholders, different groups involved, or values? Are there any that have arisen that you've needed to solve, or any that you can think of?
Yeah, I have worked before in other parts of the world, a couple of countries in Africa. But what is a bit unique with this is what we were seeing before in Neil's presentation, that there are really vast areas of land that it needs to be reforested, and it's no competing really use of this land. So it's a bit unique in that sense. But I think it's also a bit difficult to be too optimistic about other stakeholders involved, because I think there will be others popping up. But so far, since we work really close with not only with the organization MASTA, which is the name of the organization of the mosquito people, but also with the people that Marvin that talked before. He's been having lots of meetings with different villages and things. So I'm a bit surprised that there's not more conflict so far, but I'm sure they will pop up. I'm sure. So yeah.
Okay, but maybe with the Swedish consensus model of decision making from our side and with the local contacts, you'll work those through with no problem.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I should say to all of the panel, actually, if you want to ask a question of each other or come in, please please do so. Else I will work through and we'll see where the conversation leads us. I'd like to speak with Hector. So I turn on my translation. Hector, you, as I understand it, you're certifying tree planting or forestry projects. What kind of projects do you want to see more of in Honduras?
¿Qué proyectos quieren ver más a futuro?
Hola Johanna, muchas gracias. El ICF, ¿verdad? Es la institución encargada de Honduras de trabajar o rectorar el tema del sector forestal. En este caso, pues, el Programa Nacional de Reforestación, el cual represento, pues, trabaja temas de reforestación a nivel nacional en los diferentes sectores o con los diferentes actores que tenemos en la sociedad de nuestro país en actividades de reforestación, ya sea actividades de reforestación productivas con maderas de alto valor comercial o plantaciones con objetivos de protección, ¿verdad? Forestal. Es interesante cómo este proyecto podemos hablar de cómo podemos articular las diferentes acciones que puede realizar Paskaia, de las exigencias o las necesidades que tengan, en este caso las empresas internacionales. Hoy Max Burger en el tema de poder hacer esas compensaciones por temas de actividades de CO2, las podemos nosotros ver reflejadas en acciones de plantación a nivel comunitario. El ICF igual pues es la institución encargada de certificar estas plantaciones y otorgarle los certificados de plantación a los propietarios de las tierras, ¿verdad? A las personas o los poseedores de los terrenos, para que ellos puedan tener pues beneficios múltiples a lo largo de
Thank you. And in what ways do you expect to be involved in the project going forward?
¿En qué sentido cree usted que esté involucrado a futuro?
Sí, tenemos que estar involucrados, ¿verdad? Nuestra legislación nos obliga, nos manda a involucrarnos en temas de reforestación y en temas ambientales en pro de mejorar las condiciones de vida de las poblaciones en las comunidades.
Yes, so as I understand it, the government therefore is intimately involved in this project amongst all the others.
Los proyectos.
Yeah. So when you look out at tree planting projects in your country,
los proyectos de plantación de árboles en tu país,
what are the factors that you think lead to success?
¿Usted cree que nos lleven al éxito?
Los factores que nos pueden llevar al éxito.
Tiene su micrófono apagado.
¿Hola? ¿Hola? Sí. Los factores de éxito que necesitamos poner dentro del tema de plantaciones son aquellos de la comunicación a las comunidades, ¿verdad? De la buena información con los actores locales, en este caso las comunidades, el tema de la gobernanza en los territorios y un mensaje claro de cuáles son esos beneficios, ¿verdad? De estos proyectos de reforestación a las comunidades y cuáles son esas oportunidades que las comunidades, las personas tienen de mejorar sus medios de vida a lo largo del tiempo. Entonces yo creo que 3 puntos importantes, ¿verdad? Recalco el tema de gobernanza, el objetivo claro transmitido hacia las comunidades y la parte de certificación que hacemos, que hace el Estado a través del Instituto de Conservación Forestal y le entrega pues ese beneficio a las comunidades, a los beneficiados directos, en este caso pues, la gente que vive en la tierra.
Thank you. And when people are expressing concern about carbon offset projects,
las personas estén creando esta preocupación de carbon offset o en la compensación de carbono,
they're often concerned about land rights. Perhaps if I come to you, Hector, first, and then to Magnus about this question of land rights in Honduras in general.
Tienen los derechos de la tierra y las formas que están manejando la tierra en general.
So, Hector, what is the situation with land rights for the Mesquitia people?
¿Cuál es la situación del campo para las personas de Mesquitia?
En el tema de tenencia, el Estado, pues a través de diferentes instituciones, ha otorgado el derecho de la propiedad a los pueblos misquitos, ¿verdad? Las diferentes organizaciones que representan los pueblos misquitos, porque son varias, ¿verdad? Hay diferentes consejos comunitarios que se le llaman a nivel local, y estos pues tienen posesión legal sobre esos terrenos ancestrales, ¿verdad? Ellos tienen una legalidad de la tierra fuerte, ¿verdad? Se les ha otorgado y son títulos que fueron emitidos, ¿verdad?, a favor de los consejos comunitarios para que las personas puedan garantizar y puedan tener seguridad y tranquilidad de realizar diferentes acciones en pro de mejorar los medios de vida de la zona, siempre con un balance entre el medio ambiente y, ¿verdad?, lo social y económico.
With a balance with the environment and with a sustainability on the economical side.
Thank you. If we ask, if I can ask Magnus a sort of similar question, Magnus, how have you been needing to work with land rights so far?
Yeah, it's like Hector just said, it's quite fortunate that they have transferred the land rights to the Mosquito people, but it's a bit not complicated, but it's like the land that's close to the houses and things, that the families have ancestral rights to those lands. So we are thinking to work with different approaches where we can work with like agroforestry with the families. They want to plant trees, but perhaps combine these plantations with cocoa or banana or something. And then we have like the lands you saw in the pictures that Neil showed, that are like savannas, that are a bit more further away from the villages, and they are community land. So there we will have a little bit different approach. But the land rights are quite clear in Honduras at this stage, I would say.
Mm. It's sounding quite, from what I've heard so far, that Honduras is quite an advanced, not advanced, but it's quite a good situation you're going into with the setup in Honduras, with the government in favor and the land rights being reasonably secure. So that's good to hear. I move on to Clara. I'd like to bring you in, Clara.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. At several seminars about the voluntary carbon market this week, I've heard people talking about the importance of project participants being engaged in project design, of course. But often you hear it's really about safeguards to ensure no harm is done, and about consultation processes, rather than concrete examples about real involvement. So you, I know, have researched one carbon offset project, and we should say it was in Uganda, not in South America. But what were your findings about that project and the involvement of local people in project design and management?
Yes, I will answer that soon. But I want to respond to Magnus said earlier that in this case, in the Paskaia case, there are vast areas of land that need to be reforested, and there are no competing land use claims. And it seems to me that this is the case in this case. But this kind of statement, you see it again and again in these kind of forestry projects. So it's also I want to say again that I think the Paskaia case, from what I've heard, and I haven't been in Honduras, it seems like a well-functioning collaborative case. So it seems like it's working well. But these kind of statements written in texts on global level, we see them again and again, and for consumers or people or whoever buys the carbon credits in the end, this is completely uninterpretable. How can they know that the Paskaia case is good and that this other case in Africa, of which I've seen many, where there are similar claims of vast areas of unused land or degraded land, is not unused and is not really degraded, but it is used in a way that those interpreting it doesn't understand. Consumers will not be able to see the difference between these projects. So there is a big responsibility on you here as actors in the climate compensation market of doing good and to do what you are sure of is right. I just wanted to say that.
Point taken.
That is a challenge, Clara.
So the project I looked at was a CDM project, where it all sounded really good on paper, but a significant problem with CDM projects. This was a forest project under CDM, and those were quite few. But it was that all that third-party evaluators should evaluate was the carbon uptake, not sustainable development, and not local sustainable development. That was completely left to the host country. And in many cases, in these poor countries, the government and local people, they don't have the same interests, even if it's on paper democratic country. So what is really important is to, like in the Paskaia case, to actually have a dialogue with people who live in that place, and not only with central governments, for example. And how to do this, I think it needs to be context specific, and it needs to be. We can't pin down exactly how it should be done. It needs to be a sort of case to case and process thinking, I think.
We of course all hope that all the standards in the carbon offset market have progressed since the original CDM was written. But Keith, maybe would you like to respond to that? How does Plan Vivo? Clara is suggesting that the standards need to take more responsibility here, by the sounds of it. You've already presented about the standard, but in specifically about how are projects required to report on these issues, and how tight is the verification on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Thanks, Clara. A good discussion point. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why within Plan Vivo I spoke about that holistic nature. I think actually it's interesting in the discussion today. We're speaking across the whole value chain for carbon credits, and everybody seems to have mentioned that holistic nature, which is maybe a common value driving why we're all working together. Because certainly, I mean, there are lots of examples where you can have a project that's delivering very good carbon impact, but it's having a very negative impact either on the socio-economic condition or on the biodiversity side. And there's been lots of criticism and COP around that, around the planting monocultures and all these types of, as you say, like somebody said, one bad project can give everyone else a kind of a bad name. So I think in the whole design of Plan Vivo, right from the very start, that socioeconomic aspect has always been embedded in there as a requirement, not as a nice to have, not as of course we should all work with communities. It's actually written in, and that's why I tried to emphasize some particular aspects that are written into the requirements in our standard, because people have to show that, they have to demonstrate that. It's not enough just to do the validation and verification on the carbon impact, which of course is important. It's important for Kai as the buyer that what he's buying is a real carbon impact. Of course, that's vital, but not just that. And we have to be able to show that impact. And that can only be shown by speaking to the community, by reporting back from the community. Obviously in the project design, which is what we're speaking about today, the co-design bit, but not just in that. How is the project running? Are there, as the project runs, there are issues come up. We touched a little bit on that. And that's the main reason of this. I mean, we had some discussions around impact investment around COP, and people were saying, community projects, they're risky. Working with communities and trees, it's risky. And I think we would argue, actually, if we're working on a carbon project, it's actually more risky not to work with the communities, because if you're not engaging those communities, how do you know what you're doing is going to be sustained? So I would agree 100% with Clara's point. We need to make sure we're not just tracking climate impact, but also the social impact. And we've heard from the project on the ground there, I mean, those communities need to be incentivized to do this. It's not a case of we can sit here and talk about the need for action and it's now is time, but why should communities who are the ones who are being affected by climate change, suddenly take on all the pressure of that? There needs to be incentivization for them to do that, and it needs to be managed in a good way. But ultimately, we need to measure that impact on them, and we need to give them the tools to do it, and we need to give them the incentives to do it. And I think that's where the role of the carbon market, when done well, and when you have a nice, like this example here, a nice chain where you have responsible buyers and projects are receiving fair prices, and it's been managed in a very holistic and good way, then I think we should talk more about these sort of models, because I think people hear too much about the bad examples and not the good.
Or the potential to do good. It sounds very much like the fair trade principles that we're all really talking about here.
Can I have a brief comment?
Of course. And then Kai. Yes.
I just wanted to comment on something that Keith said earlier, that Plan Vivo is working specifically with understanding and addressing the heterogeneity of rural communities, and also looking for the most marginalized and making sure that projects are not negatively affecting and are positively affecting communities widely. And I think that is really important, because many projects just say that they work with local communities, and that was the case with the project I studied. And they had local people hired from the nearby area that worked with local communities, but still they worked with the elite. And it's very, very common. So actually stating and thinking about how to reach out broadly is really important, I would say.
Actually, that's a link to the question I was going to ask you, Clara. So thank you. I was going to ask you about specifics, and one specific about doing this well is to reach the whole spread in the community. But Kai, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to pose a bigger picture here as well, that UN is very clear that we will not have any ability to reach the 1.5 or 2 degree target without capturing carbon from the atmosphere. So we need to do it. It's just a question about how do we do it. So that's another lens of looking at this. Which will be the best projects for planting trees? And I'm saying planting trees not because that will be the only measure, but that it is today the only large-scale measure which has high-quality offsets in it, and which is a removal. So from that perspective, it's just sometimes the glass is half full when we're talking about this, but sometimes it's half empty. I rather see it as half full. Wow, we have this in place already now, and that's good, and we're going to make it even better in the future.
So the importance of getting these projects right becomes even greater. Yeah. Clara and Keith, would either of you have anything more to add on the specifics of how we do this? I mean, as you're saying, Clara, it's very easy to talk about. It's very easy for it to make it look good on paper, but how is it really done in practice? What does it take? Either of you want to start?
I think when Kai talked about we, I reacted. And I think that we need to think about who we are, and I think that we across the globe are different people. And if we say that we need to do this, and then we say that poor people in development countries should plant trees on their land, we need to be careful about talking about we. We also need to be very careful about talking about double wins, I would say. We need to talk about what is actually going on in each case. And I think that is one key to success, one key to, and I was really, I really appreciated Neil's presentation, where he lifted risks and uncertainties, and having this awareness and preparedness for that this will not just be beneficial automatically for everyone. Is really important for success, if we mean by success that it should be beneficial to all engaged.
Thank you. And Keith, your experience, come back to Kai. Keith, you've also worked in development projects yourself. What are the actual concrete actions that need happening in the carbon offset world in these situations?
Yeah, no, well, I can give some specific examples of tools we use, but I think Marvin said when he did his talk about it's about not imposing but listening, and I think that's a really good principle to apply. I mean, yeah, I come from a development background where sadly much bad practice has happened on community projects where people have a model and they think, yeah, great, the model works, and then they now try and impose that in as many different systems and contexts as they can, without appreciating that very important point is that each system is different, or context specific, there are cultural issues, all the stuff we all know. So I think there are tools that can help go, like participatory rural appraisal type tools, sitting down with communities, mapping out their resources. For example, doing season and calendars, practical things where you can really understand a little bit more. Of course, asking different perspectives, I think, is really important. So again, as you mentioned, it's not just going and speaking to the leaders of the community. It's asking, maybe having focus groups with women groups, or different organizations who are representing different perspectives in that area. Speaking to neighboring communities, looking at the broader context, local authorities. Again, trying to understand that as much as you can, the picture, the broader perspective. I think in the case of this particular project, you're using this soft system methodology approach, which is this kind of inquiry-led approach. I think that's another great tool or an example of how to do that. And I think, often it's about experience, and it's about having people who if you go to any project or any community or any organization, they're tempted to show you the good things. They don't want to show you like things that aren't working or talk about the issues, because people are worried that that's a negative thing. So it's building that trust. I mean, in all the community projects I've worked on, ultimately it's about developing trust and getting to that point where you can have open and honest conversations in different ways, and that's how you'll deal with the issues when they come up. Often in short funded projects, like for 3 years or 5 years, you don't have time to do that. You barely have time to understand the context you're working in, and the project's finished. The carbon projects, because of their longer term nature, again, this project is a great example. Planting hardwood type trees is going to take a long time for these trees and the benefits to mature. It's not a simple quick fix here. It's a long-term relationship with the community. So yeah, I think it's using those established tools and building capacity within the community as you go, that they're not reliant on the project and the project developer, that they're building that capacity themselves through the development cycle of the project. That's when you get that success, and then the community will be able to identify the issues themselves and tell you about them, and we can help them try and address them.
Excellent. Kai, you wanted to respond to Clara, I think.
Yes, please. I wanted to. It's great we're having this discussion. And when I said we, I meant the global collective, and really the people in Paskaia also want the climate fix, because it's going to hurt them really a lot if it's not. But I think what I need from the research society is that you should be able to look into differences between different offsetting projects and really be picky about the quality. And if you would see any way that Max is buying something which is not voluntarily sold, that would be awful for us. We would stop doing that all directly. But as we see it right now, we see these people as active agents. They want something, and we can pay them, and they can do that. It's trade. It's not aid. So we hope that we're actually helping them to, reduce poverty and drought and erosion and other things locally. So it's just about perspective here all the time, and quite often, I'm not saying you're doing that, Clara. I don't think you're doing it, but quite often I hear like carbon offsetting is not working, and it's just a too broad term. It's like saying all animals are predators or something. Or all animals are herbivores. It doesn't work like that.
So an appeal for a nuanced and specific response to carbon offsetting situations. Yes, Johanna.
Yeah, I just have to agree with Kai there. And I going back to what Clara said in the beginning, that it's so hard for consumers to interpret this. And I agree, it's such a complex area, constantly moving as well. And just for us working with this and having experience, it's hard to say, okay, they work with local communities, but do they really work with the individuals and their land, or is it on a higher level up, and how much involvement is there with the local communities? And the complexity here is that it's a chain. It's what the integrity that goes on in the project, the social and environmental integrity, and then you have the company that wants to carbon offset, and if they haven't done their homework and taking responsibility, but they in their claim say that fly with us, we are climate neutral or something, it could be damaging for other parts that are doing everything with integrity. So it's not only in the carbon offset part of the chain that there are complexity, it's the full chain. And I find that hard working with this, that for Zero Emission, we would like to sell the fair trade organic fruit in this landscape, but everything is called fruit. So if something is rotten or bad, it's the message is don't eat fruit. And often, like you said, Kai, the bad fruit is picked up maybe by researchers, and there's a debate where companies need to reply to researchers, and in media they usually put a black and white focus. So it's not easy to take on this challenge to communicate with customers something that is very, very complex in a full chain. I guess that's my message.
And what we've done today is not so usually done to have the whole chain talking with each other either.
Can I come in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Magnus, yes, welcome.
Yeah, I was thinking, Keith talked before about the participatory methods, and that's what was how I first met Neil, that had a presentation before. Over 25 years ago, we were studying this at the university here in Sweden. And so we really want to do this. But I think something that is a bit of a challenge for us, because this was like a private initiative from us to start to do this, because I was working in Mosquitia salvaging sunken wood. That's how I ended up in this part of the world. And then they approached me and wanted us to do this help them to reforest their lands. But something which could be a bit sensitive here is that if Kai pays something that's aimed to go to reforestation in Mosquitia, there is so many other organizations that wants a cut of this. And some of you are on the screen now. Keith wants a cut, Claire wants a cut, and now we need to have like an external validation consultant that wants a cut. So I'm a bit afraid. We want to be transparent, and I want to tell Ranulfo that, okay, Kai paid me $100, and I don't want to tell Ranulfo you got 2 and the rest of us got 98. I want to tell Ranulfo that you got 85 and the rest of us got 15. That would be fine. But this is really a challenge for us, especially in the beginning when we're so small and we don't have the advantage of scale so far. So this is a really big challenge, I think.
You raised some important questions, and I think I sent in my questions that maybe we come to money here, but money is often taboo to talk about in general in society, and in the carbon offsetting world is notoriously untransparent about this. But Keith, perhaps I bring you in there, because Plan Vivo has a unique model actually on this.
Yeah, no, thanks, Claire, and thanks, Magnus. You raise a really important point. I mean, it echoes of the carbon cowboys that were around when the VCM first started, and that transparency of what happens in between somebody buying a carbon credit and the money actually getting to the community was often not very clear at all. I mean, again, in Plan Vivo, we have a specific requirement around equitable benefit sharing. I still think we're the only standard in the market that has that. And for us, we recognize, especially with projects like you guys are working on, that there are costs, development costs, especially at the start of a project. So, but our commitment within Plan Vivo, again, another requirement written into the standard, is that transparency of the flow of carbon finance, and the commitment that at least 60% of that finance needs to go directly back to the communities. And that's the minimum requirement. Of course, there's nothing to say it can't be more than that. But often, again, in the start of a project where there are high development costs, like 80-90%, as you're talking about there, is not possible at the start of a project. So that's written in, and that's exactly to address the point you're saying. We need to make sure that the communities that are doing this are benefiting. Of course, there are some costs to cover along the way, but again, that model has to be able to be workable. If it's not, if a project can't do that, then there's a question whether it should be happening at all for the community. You know, if you can't put that money back in, and it works. I mean, so far to date, $18 million has gone back to communities through the Plan Vivo model. So 60% of all the sales of Plan Vivo credits have gone back, and we're able to show that. You can go online and look at a project and see. And I think that shows you, you know, when people talk about the scale of community projects, which often start small and often take a while to build up, people say, oh, they're too small scale, they never deliver benefits. But when you look at it like that, it can deliver real tangible benefits. And those communities, I think Clara mentioned about a project that she'd reviewed in Uganda. One of our largest projects, Trees for Global Benefits, is in Uganda. And they started very, very small, and they built it up. And the way they did it was through using the carbon finance that they generated to go right back, and then allowing them to expand the model to different communities, allowing them to invest in technology to reduce the monitoring costs. Of course, the cost of verification and validation are still some of the biggest costs, but also one area where we're very keen to look at working more with local independent auditors and experts who can maybe help support some of that work and try and reduce some of the costs in that process. But yeah, it's a challenge, but I think the model can work where the benefits are going back to the community. But it can be a challenge, especially for small projects starting off, and especially where it takes a while for the cash flow to happen.
And personally, I think it reflects also, it's part of the issue we have with the huge distances between the two ends of this chain, if you like, but because those distances are not only geographical, and they're not only language differences, they're also cultural differences and wealth differences, and that plays its part, unfortunately, in the way the carbon market works. But we hope at Zero Emission we are working on transparency every day with projects in Plan Vivo. Clara, did you want to come in?
Yes.
Last point, nearly. I think we're nearly done.
I was kicked out of the system for a few times, but I had problems with the network. But I wanted to respond to Kai and say that if I should say something general about good and bad projects, I would say that smaller projects that work closer with local communities are better, and each large-scale plantation projects are worse. And I haven't, maybe there are good large-scale plantation projects, but I haven't seen one. And I have seen promising small-scale projects.
That's a very nice way to perhaps end. Unfortunately, I feel we could talk forever on such important issues. However, we are coming near to the end of the time, and I'd like to invite Lars back in. Lars, are you there? I'm hoping you have been taking some notes, maybe, and have a few reflections. Do you have your top 3 or 4 or 5 takeaways?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I've been listening carefully, and it's been really interesting, and lots of very good things have been said today. And I think it's of course hard to summarize 1.5 hours, but a few things I picked up. I think what Clara mentioned around this need to address the issues around the land use, and having local communities truly involved in this is really key to what we're doing. And as everyone said, and Kai's point here, the responses sort of help us. How can we do this in a way? Because I think every serious player here, everyone here today, and lots of other people really want to do the best thing. So I think we need to find ways of doing it and doing this, and maybe researchers like you, Clara, or other people can find ways of finding these bad apples among what we're doing. And maybe you also, Keith, can be even more involved in this, because I think that's a key thing. Because this whole discussion about greenwashing is really hard for a serious company like Max Hamburger that truly wants to do the right thing. And actually, as Kai said, which is also interesting, that they can show that this serious focus on these issues has really made the company more profitable and more successful in the local markets. And I mean, all this discussion is really interesting. And I would like to end, because I know the time is running out, with Ranulfo's comment, of course, and his sort of true and strong ask for support. That was really strong for me to listen to. And I think that was really interesting to see directly on the screen here.
Thank you. Not more I can add to that. So we've reached the end, unfortunately, for today. I look forward personally to following very closely the development of the Honduras project and to being involved with all of you. If anyone listening would like to continue the discussion, then please feel free to share email addresses in the chat. And many thanks to everyone who's taken part and for everyone listening. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, especially goodbye to Hector and Marvin, and hi to Ranulfo.
Thank you.
Bye.